So the ATF recently admitted in court filings that they are continuing to enforce short barrel rifle restrictions and regulations against some pistol-braced pistols. That's code for, by the way, raids, arrests, prison, felonies, you name it. I broke that news last week. However, there is a big update that I want to share with you because I had the opportunity to speak to a number of industry insiders who wish to remain anonymous, but I've got inside information about what's going on, what happened, and what that all means. So guys, let's get into it. All right, so first we're going to do the very quick speed run through what the heck's going on here in case you missed last week's video, which will be much more in depth than our quick speed run. Very quickly, about 2012, pistol-braced pistols, completely lawful according to the ATF. Then they reaffirmed that a few years later. Then they walked it back. Then they said, no, just kidding, it's actually okay, except maybe don't shoulder it. And then we kind of had a bunch of chaos, and suddenly then President Biden's ATF said, you know what? We're going to release this new rule, and the new rule is going to classify which pistol braces are felonies. By the way, it's 99.9% of them, and which ones aren't. Which means that the about 7 million or more Americans that had the audacity to believe that the ATF was going to stick to their original interpretations, well, you had some problems. You were given the opportunity to register your pistol-braced pistol for free. Not applicable in certain states, void where prohibited, because there's about a dozen or so states where you're not allowed to own a short barrel rifle, in which case, destroy, sell, or prison. I mean, hey, that's just the way it goes when you're playing the Second Amendment ATF lottery, right? So all that kind of stuff happened. And then, of course, the rule got vacated and struck down. In other words, gone. Done. But that was the rule. That was not the federal statute. Keep in mind, both federal as well as, depending on where you are, different state statutes that govern the existence of short barrel rifles, how they have to be registered or not, all that kind of stuff, that still stands. So we're just talking about the classification rule. That's what got struck down. So where did this all kerfuffle happen? Well, the kerfuffle happened when in a recent federal court filing, the government attorney representing the ATF dropped a few lines. Here's how they went. Quote, plaintiffs, those are the good guys, also made much of the fact that defendants, that's the ATF, continue to enforce the NFA's and GCA's regulation of short-barreled rifles against some braced-equipped pistols, even though the rule has been universally vacated. But that should come as no surprise, as that is consistent with how defendants have always explained how things work if a court vacated the rule or enjoined its enforcement. And then they also went on to say this, I'm going to give you the English translation, but a lot of people, you're high information, you're very analytical, love it. You want the quotes. Here's the quotes. So then they also dropped this, quote, at any rate, that defendants continue to enforce certain statutory requirements and prohibitions that they have been delegated the authority and responsibility to administer is irrelevant to whether plaintiff's APA challenge to the now defunct rule is moot. Okay, great. What's the plain English? The plain English is, look, all you Second Amendment folks out there, here we're talking about Gun Owners of America, fantastic group. You should be a member. I am a paying member myself. We tried to publish a rule to tell you guys, hey, this is what we're going to prosecute as a felony, and this is what we're going to say is not going to be a felony. You guys got the rule struck down. Cool. Great. But doesn't change one iota about the fact that we can still interpret the statutes. And then, of course, we prosecute based on our interpretation. And you may have gotten the rule struck down, but you didn't strike down our agency and our authority to make those calls. And those calls can still exist regardless of whether or not there's a rule that we put out there to try to help you, at the end of the day, make sense of what we are doing internally. You see how that kind of reads, how that sets up? So the ATF is saying, look, this is how we're going to interpret it. You guys struck down the messaging system, but we can still do as we see fit because we have a duty and a responsibility, and we have the authority to interpret the laws, and everything else flows out of that, right? The raids, the prosecution, the arrests. Great. Okay. You're caught up. What's the big update? This is the big update. I had an opportunity to speak to a number of industry insiders who, again, wish to remain anonymous, but suffice it to say they are very well-placed, well-connected individuals. They were very much plugged in on what happened last week, including this channel breaking this news from this ATF court filing. Here's the long short of it. The word is that this was likely a very poorly worded court filing. I just read you two different quotes, and I think you
Safety Man here, safetyman.co. Today we're going to talk about very